It was so beautifully shot. And I remember one scene in particular, she comes down the stairs to meet up with her fiancé's parents, who are deeply religious. And she realises, because she's been raped, subsequent to that, that once they know that, she's a no-go. And anyway, she doesn't really love the guy. But it was an enormously complex and long thing, and it went, the camera followed from room to room to room as she blurted out and made a fool of herself and took off and ended up on the back porch or whatever. And it was a long, convoluted camera set of movements and 100 million reflected surfaces. And anyway, we practiced it, and, you know, finally we shot it. And I thought, well, that's it. I can't do any better than that. I think I cracked everything I was hoping for there. And then they had a look at it on the video and said, we have to go again. I went, oh my God, I'll never do it. How can I do that? I can't do it again. That was, you know, and then I thought, hang on, you actually have no choice. You have to do it. And so I did, and it was fine, you know. And it was probably quite an important lesson, I think, about, you know, you make these assumptions and you think you've cracked it and, you know, what do you know? Also, you're a lousy judge of your own performance, you know. I worked with Helen Morse, who was a really tremendous actress and a very giving and loving actress. We had a scene where the two of us had gone riding. I think Iris's boyfriend had shot off to China before her, and she had just found out, and she was really upset. She falls off a horse. I run over, I lean over, and she tells me why she's upset. And she did a tremendous job, Helen, and was really moving, and her eyes were filled with tears, but everything was happening in this very simple way. And they said cut and all that. And then the director came across and he said, that was fabulous, but I'd just love it if the tears could just roll down the face. I think it would be more potent. And I remember thinking, oh, okay. So it was nothing to do with me, it was to do with her. So she did it again, and she did. The tears rolled down and everything, but it wasn't anywhere near the impact of her not able to really fully cry, and yet so choked up. And for me, it was a huge lesson of going, no, those sort of physical things are nothing. I mean, yes, if they happen, that's fine, but what's going on inside and all that is where the potency is. And it's not our job to cry necessarily, it's let the audience do the crying. With Crush, there was a problem with some of the crew that were reluctant to buy into Alison's peculiar way of seeing. And so there was a lot of unhappiness within the crew, which is not common, you know. It's just everything about producer is putting together a decent crew. So there was a little unease there. And I think it was very hard on Alison in particular. And I actually met one of the crew about 5 years later who said once he'd seen the film he understood what she was trying to do, and he was sorry that they had made it difficult for her to fulfill fully her. So, you know, an actor's only just a part. We're all just parts to make this thing as a whole, you know. I mean, you might be the visible bit, but it's a huge group of people that go to making a film, and I think that's why you often get actors get up going, well, you know, thanks, but thanks for everyone who was involved, because that's very true. You are just part of it. That was a world of head injury that I knew nothing about. So that was incredibly interesting to figure out. And then, so I spent a lot of time, I went down to the Sutherland Head Unit and went to the communication classes. And I was introduced. This is Donogh Rees. She's an actress. And immediately some guy, done any porn? You know, it cracked me up. But that was a case in point of no censorship, which was a head injury thing. And that, so, you know, that was fascinating going there and being up front about, oh yeah, no, I haven't actually. I found it frustrating because I knew she'd been a really fine politician and very curious because I couldn't understand why she was sitting on the right. I was still quite young, I suppose. Well, I probably had a glean of wine then, but you know. So I read up hugely, books she had read. Written, sorry, you know, I thought maybe they'll be over my head, you know, but they're not. She writes very intelligently and very clearly and with a great deal of focus, and making tea in Parliament and Counting for Nothing and all those wonderful, wonderful books, to get where she lay as a human being, because, as you say, you were seeing a very tiny, slim element of her at a very potent and upsetting time, and what was shown of her was frustratingly a one little slice of moment that was very emotional, when you knew that she'd been a fantastic politician in many other ways. And so I did my best to try and show more depth than there was really scope for in that particular element of the story. So that was frustrating. I didn't try to be a mimic or anything like that. I don't think I'm a particularly good mimic anyway, but I wasn't aiming for anything like that, or vocal or anything. But I just wanted to find an essence of her that was true. But I'm really proud that that series was made, and I was really proud to be a part of it, because it is a fundamental part of our history. Xena, I remember both parts, but I know one of them I was hanging upside down. So they brought around this fantastic set of climbing framey thing for me to practice on for a couple of weeks, which my daughter adored. And then I did the whole thing upside down, and I think she was a volcano goddess, so she was coming up, but they'd shot me upside down so that, you know, like everything was drooping, eyes were flopping this way and hair was down, but it looked like it was very bizarre, really funny. Herc, I worked with Michael Hurst, who's an old mate, you know, we toured when we were really young actors for a year or so, and I did the fantastically named Frigga. Well, it's probably Frigga, but, and that was fun. Iced up and yeah, they are marvellous and big, but in the end, you don't really think about that. You just, it's the job in hand. And they're really good, strong stories, you know, and great fun. Yeah, many varieties of spice of life, as they say. I found her wonderful to play in many respects, but then I got really, there was a lot of times she was doing hardly anything. It was quite boring. But she was very true, and her, for example, her racism, if she'd been like the Ku Klux Klan or something like that, you'd dismiss her. But because her racism was so everyday and so normal, that if occasionally, it didn't happen that often, someone would say, hey, you're a racist. Or, you know, your character's real racist. Or actually, they'd say, you're racist. And I'd say, well, you mean, yes, Judy is racist. Does that make you guys talk about stuff? And they'd go, yeah, really. And I said, well, that's why she is. You know, because if she was extreme, you just wouldn't watch her. But because she is, you discuss that stuff, and that's part of, you know, the job. So there were lots of really interesting things like that. And also, she was really, a lot of people really loved her because she was just a very loyal, tough woman. She didn't care whether anybody knew anything about her. But I think the frustrating thing I found was she was a certain age, 40-ish, white, pretty middle-of-the-road chick, but it was deemed unnecessary to know anything else about her. So that got, you know, I'm being incredibly frank now, I thought, yeah, I understood she was a hub and a wheel and things revolved around, she'd fight the fight and all that, but it was tedious not to be able to expose more of her life, and occasionally it happened. And then you'd flower, and then it would go on. It's Romeo and Juliet set in a motor camp in Waihi, but basically they're trailer trash, the whole lot. So they're gangland type scenario. But we had to lip sync to this voice that had been pre-recorded, and it's all Shakespeare, but sung, which presented a couple of difficulties. One, the person who'd recorded didn't necessarily wasn't familiar with Shakespeare or how to scan things. So I had one curious thing where I was approaching my cousin had been killed, Tybalt, was dead there, and I had to say to the princess, you know, we need revenge, basically. But I said, Tybalt, princes, thou art true, and it sounded like I was calling the prince Tybalt, but Tybalt was my dead cousin. So, but there's no breath, no hesitation, nothing. It just ran as if it was Tybalt Prince. And so there were curious things like that you had, you know, all I could do was bang his foot and hope to God that sort of conveyed this is who I'm talking about. I hope it works. I have no idea, I might be rubbish. I might be okay. I have no idea. I have no control over that sort of thing. Well, you don't much as an actor on film. But it was certainly fun to do, and certainly outrageous in some respects. And I think will be a cult and really successful, or a cult and not.